We're ready. We're live.
Great. Welcome to the September 18th, 2023 meeting of the Governance Committee for the University of Rhode Island Board of Trustees. The meeting will be held in person with committee members participating both in person and remotely. At this time, I will conduct a roll call attendance to determine if a quorum is present. Please clearly respond present via WebEx or present in person when your name is called. I am Courtney Nicolato. I am present via WebEx. Vice Chair Jay Placencia.
Present via WebEx.
Charles Fogarty. Monica Garnes.
Present via WebEx.
Great, thank you, Monica. Matthew Lenz.
Present via WebEx.
Joseph Matthews.
Present in person.
Robert Wagan.
Present via WebEx.
David Capriel. Mark Palange.
Present via WebEx.
And I see our Vice Chair, Armand Sabatoni.
Present via WebEx.
All right. A quorum is present. I'm going to call the meeting to order. A reminder to all members for the benefit of our audience and for the note taker, please clearly identify yourself whenever you comment, make a motion or a second to a motion. Participants using WebEx are required to keep their cameras on as remote members, and all persons present at the meeting location must be clearly audible and visible to each other and to those watching. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge that the University of Rhode Island occupies the traditional homeland of the Narragansett Nation and the Niantic people. I'd also like to welcome our newest board members, Monica Garnes. Garnes or Garnes?
Garnes.
All right, got it right
Yeah,
the first
thank
time. Joseph Matthews, to the Governance Committee. Bob Wagan did join us in June, but welcome to Bob as well. Our first item on our agenda is the approval of the June 13th, 2023 Governance Committee meeting minutes. May I have a motion that the Governance Committee approve the minutes of the June 13th, 2023 committee meeting?
Monica Garnes, so moved.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second, Bob Wagan.
Thanks, Bob. Is any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll ask for a voice vote. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. The next agenda item is item number 2, discussion items. And the first item on our agenda is around our 2023 board composition matrix survey results. And so as a reminder, and for those new to the group, each year we assess key demographic details and expertise of our board to understand where our, how we are representing the community that we so proudly serve, but also ensuring the level of expertise and insights that our board members bring to our organization. And so I'm just going to show my screen real quick. We will post this insight, the details, the data has been posted. This is just visualizations of that data. I'm going to share. There we go. And so a couple of things to pull from the data and some insights. First, you'll see that also we took on the data, the last 3 years of data. Obviously, this board will be 4 in February, so we have 3 years of data thus far. But the first is to assess our alumni status, so folks who are on the board who are also serving as alum. And you'll see the bottom is our first year, and up you see we have 71.4% of our board members proudly call themselves alums. Additionally, we are often looking at the insights around our in-state versus out-of-state residents. And so here you'll see that each year we actually get closer to a 50-50 route where we have about 43% right now who are out of state and about 57% who are in state. Additionally, in the data over the last few years, we looked at our age ranges of our trustees, and particularly you'll see that the top is our 65 plus group. And so we have a significant number and increase in, and you'll see actually it kind of evened out from the initial start of the of the board, with 65 plus being the largest group of folks on our board. We do and have seen a significant drop where we have no folks in the 26 to 34 range. So just to give you an idea of how our group evens out, we have about
Just aged out of that, Courtney, so I apologize.
Yeah. So was it your fault, Matt? You
That
came
is,
out of
that is my fault, yeah, you know.
All right, good to know. You'll see 5% are 18 to 25, and our student representative certainly helps with that. Our next is 35 to 44. I have shifted, I am now in the 45 to 54 range, so I have shifted that number slightly, but to give you an idea of how we are represented in our ages. Gender, we've had a significant shift from 2022 to 2023, where women are leading the charge on our board. We have about 2/3 of our board are women, and 1/3 of our board are men. Just to know that, and I think always we want to look and see when we are providing recommendations to the governor, we want to provide this data to him as well, so he has an understanding of what the demographic makeup of our board looks like. And then on race and ethnicity, you'll see the light blue is 2021, the gray is 2022, and the dark blue is this year. We have seen a stronger representation. We now have representation in Asian and Asian American demographic. We have seen pretty even in our Black and African American demographic, and a slight reduction in our white membership, and a slight reduction over the years in our Latino representation. And so this again is something that we consistently want to look at and consistently want to understand as we are providing recommendations. I think it's also important to note we do not make the decisions on who sits on our board. That is we are all working at the pleasure of the governor and then Speaker and Senate President on their specific representatives as well. But what we do every year for our new board members is we do provide some of this detail, also some of the accomplishments of the board. We try to do that at the end of the calendar year as the governor is looking to do any reappointments or new appointments in early of the year. Early 2024 will be the next. And so this data is certainly helpful to us, but it's also helpful to them and him and his team as well. And so additionally in the report, we also pulled data to understand level of expertise. And so there were 2 buckets in that frame. One was around, let's see, I'm pulling it up, on expertise. We saw overwhelmingly 85% of our board members said they had expertise in executive management. We also saw a significant number that have experience in working with the government and in the business realms, as well as finance and investment were the top vote getters, if you will, in expertise. And then lastly, on skill sets, we wanted to understand what level of skill sets folks took great pride in that we could potentially leverage as part of our work as board members, and budget and strategic planning. We're and executive leadership with the top 3 vote getters. Budget, fundraising wasn't too far behind, as well as public relations. And so, and then lastly, around 50% of our board said that research education space is an area of focus for them as well. So hopefully you saw, as I did, that there's a wealth of great data for us to leverage, but to understand. But I want to stop here and see if there's any comments or questions about the board composition matrix results.
Courtney, I had a question.
Yeah.
Is there any other kind of research or survey of these kinds of sectors that you talked about, maybe through AGB or someone else, to see how we compare to other land grant universities and universities of our size from the region?
Yeah, and I want to turn it to Michelle and Alyssa and Chelsea to see if you guys have any thoughts on that front.
This is Michelle. I think that's a good question, Bob. We actually haven't compared or checked resources from AGB, but could easily do that just to get an idea of not only the AGB resources nationally, but even throughout New England, our other land grant schools. So happy to do that, but we haven't checked.
I was just thinking that in comparing yourself to yourself is one good thing, but
Yeah.
it's also nice to see what other universities of the same size, the same kind of mission would have in terms of age, gender, race, et cetera, all the key factors that are taken into this survey. So it'd be nice, and perhaps the next time around that we see that kind of information, it'd be good for the appointing authorities to see where we may be high, we may be low, and where they could really make up a deficit that we may have in their appointments. So
Great.
just a thought.
No, I love it. That's great.
Great.
So we'll take that as a to-do. Bob, the other thing that I was thinking about when I was looking at the data a few days back was I'd love to see how our board is in alignment with representation, whether it is student body, whether it is staff, whether, just to have an understanding of how our alignment matches with theirs. And so to the same vein as you compare us to similar organizations, similar universities. Anything else? Any thoughts?
You hate to see the numbers change to the negative, right, in some areas, but I think we're doing a great job, and I just want to reiterate the fact that we do not have any control over who is appointed to the board. So
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess I'll stop there.
No, and I think you're right. I think the more that we can provide this insight and provide the comparisons to Bob's thought, I think will certainly help. But yes, agreed.
Hi, Courtney, it's Monica Garnes. I know we say that we don't have control, which I totally understand that. Are we able to, though, appoint people with the diverse backgrounds and areas that we feel we may be lacking, with the hope that the governor will take that into consideration?
So yes, we can provide recommendations, and you are one of the fabulous people that we recommended, right? So, but at the end of the day, those recommendations are taken up by his team and himself, and then determined on who's appointed. But yes, absolutely, we can take that into consideration.
Courtney, this is Joe Matthews. An observation based on some not-for-profit experience we're going through right now. Diversification in age is something I know we should always keep our eye on. It's always nice to see if you can move the median age somewhere close to whatever the age of the president is of the university, because at least then there's an understanding of the things that are going on. I'm still grappling with how to use my cell phone properly. So, I mean, I just think it's the kind of thing that age is a form of diversification and opportunity and forward thinking when it comes to strategic plans.
Absolutely. And the other things that we pulled, Joe, is veteran status. We want to understand amongst our group veteran status, as well as folks experiencing disabilities. And so those are also captured in the composition matrix, just weren't, the data wasn't pulled into graphical display. But you're right, we want to make sure that we are continuing to look at all the factors, and that is definitely one of them amongst as we spoke about gender representation too, and that, hey, I'm all for women power. We have a great group of women on this board, and now we are the majority for sure. So those are all great points that we want to look into. Anything else as we move forward with this data?
Hey, Courtney.
Hi, Margo.
Hey, I'm late to the conversation, but I get the gist of it. I do think that we have, while the governor appoints the board members, there is, and this was the first time with this governor, so we had to sort of figure out a process.
Yeah.
but there is generally a pretty good give and take, where the governor's office is looking for our recommendations. They're also balancing that with people that they would like to see on the board. And that kind of proved out in this process where we did get Monica and Maria on the board. And so I think if we made this a little bit more of an ongoing dialogue, so that it doesn't come to at the very end, we're like, oh, these are the candidates we want. I think if we put forth, these are the kind of characteristics we're looking for, or even the type of people, if we have specific people in mind,
Yeah.
I bet we'd get a better or higher probability of success if we sort of started introducing that more episodically than at the end. And so I think if we can work together on that, and it just occurred to me as we're talking about it that it kind of got it, because the governor was new in his role and he had a million things to do, it kind of came to the the end of the process. But I would bet they would welcome a discussion, sort of an ongoing discussion.
Yep. Agreed.
I couldn't agree more. I think this is Bob Wigan. I think that's an excellent suggestion by Margot. That's the kind of thing that they would like to see up front and see early, so that they're not making mistakes in their appointment process and they're doing something that is in line with what the mission is of the university. So you might think about the various things that Mark has put forward as key to our success at URI. So I couldn't agree with Margot more. I think that's a good thing to do as soon as possible.
Thanks, Bob.
That's great. So we'll take that as an offline action item. Margot, as a result of the conversation, I think it's great. Was somebody saying something? Sorry if I interrupted.
Yeah, sorry about that. This is Jay. No, the one comment that I wanted to make also is that I love the fact that we're doing this and that we're gathering all this data. What's also great about it is to show what talent might be lacking on the board. Is there, legal expertise, finance, all these various things that we should have on the board that we're still lacking, so that we can share that as well, not just the diversity factors.
Absolutely. Yep. And we have those as well. So we'll make sure that we provide those to them. And what I like about those skill sets that we pulled down to and asked as part of the composition matrix this go around is I think they're really distinctive. One, in its alignment with Focus URI, and two, of kind of the roles and responsibilities of us as trustees. So I think they'll be a great guide. Good. All right. Anything else on the composition matrix survey and its results? All right. Moving on, the next item B, is conflict disclosure research. And so you'll see that there is an enclosure in our agenda, but wanted to share, just as a reminder, we talked about it briefly at the last meeting, that managing conflicts is critically important for our public bodies. And we do have a code of ethics that is required of each of us to fill out. It tends to be a bit more towards financial conflicts. And so what the to-do was from last meeting was to pull some ideas and some research from other bodies and what they have used. And Michelle and Alyssa have done that. And so Michelle and Alyssa, is there anything you want to share on and about Enclosure 2B?
I'll jump in real quick and then just turn it over to Michelle. But I think that there was a concern in the discussion that the financial conflict disclosure really only disclosed financial conflicts. But we did Michelle went and looked at the form that is filed each year by the board members and felt like question 9 really does capture any other relationships, not just financial relationships. So the committee had been concerned about things like board membership from family members and things like that. And question 9 on the conflict of interest form that's already completed for the state does really capture those things, those other relationships. So the thought that Michelle and I had and shared with you was that what we should be doing is just making sure that we're capturing and sharing the data that's already collected for the state and sharing that for this committee. And rather than having another form that all of the board members complete in addition to the state form. And I'll turn it over to Michelle, who's done a lot more work on this.
Yeah, thank you, Alyssa. So it was a learning experience, obviously. So obviously you all fill out the conflict of interest form each year and fill it out and submit it to the Ethics Commission. And it's usually submitted by the last Friday in April. So the thought was to take that information over the summer and have a chance to compile that and provide it as a report. And I know Courtney and I talked a little bit about it more, and I think even if we were to expand upon it, Courtney had shared, for example, what about teaching experience and other things that board members do that don't really come up in the question 9 specifically about other boards. So we could expand upon that, and perhaps it's just a matter of saying, are there any other areas that you would like to provide to us to share with us in your other roles? Like Courtney shared that she teaches at Northwestern, I think, Northeastern.
Yeah, yeah.
So, there are things like that we wouldn't normally know. And maybe that wouldn't even come up if it were part of question 9, for example. So we thought we could just work on that and expand on it a little bit more. And then come back to you with that report.
Great. Any questions on kind of the direction to which we're heading on that front? All right.
I have one question.
Sure.
It's really not a question, but maybe perhaps legal advice. As we start collecting information about board members, how is that going to be presented, stored, or accessed by the general public? As a matter of fact, I used to fill out this form for years and years and years, being in politics and being on various boards.
Yeah.
And I've already filled out one and filed it already with the Conflict of Interest Commission as of June 1st. Should we keep copies, or should we request copies of those forms be held in our files? Is there a reason for that? Or is that just overkill and that we may not have the legal authority to do that? So the only question, we have to be sure in our furthering going forward that we're not doing too much, but we're doing enough in terms of conflict of interest avoidance.
Yeah, if Courtney, I can speak to that. I think the forms and the completed forms are already accessible to the public. So they're all posted publicly. So what we would be doing is just taking the data that's already disclosed and already publicly available and compiling it into a report for easier digestion by governance. And so you could then evaluate it and be aware of any potential conflicts of interest. Every board member is also obligated to disclose any potential conflict of interest prior to any particular action being taken where their conflict might be implicated. And this compilation that Michelle will be working on with Courtney, this report, would also include any additional disclosures that people made in between filling out this annual report. Like someone might come and say, I have this new relationship I'd like to disclose, and then that would be added to the report. What we would do then is we would need to identify any sort of actionable potential conflicts. So if someone, for instance, is a board member on a vendor of URI, we would want to make sure that our procurement division was aware of that conflict of interest, and so that we could manage the conflict or mitigate the conflict. And so that would be the action that would be taken on it. In terms of it being publicly accessible, the report that we prepare, the compilation of the information, I think would be accessible to the public from an APRA perspective, Access to Public Records Act. So we wouldn't want to put any sort of commentary in there. We would only include facts. We wouldn't include anything in there that wasn't already publicly discoverable. So someone would already know that, someone was on a particular board, and the disclosure statements that are filed with the state are already public. And part of the reason that what you're saying, Bob, we don't want to do overkill. That's part of the reason I had recommended working with Michelle that we don't do an additional conflict disclosure form for URI. We just have this conflict disclosure form, and then we do a report that compiles all of that information. And then if this committee decides there are additional questions we need to ask, we can address that, but include them in that one report.
Do you see any jeopardy if we fail to complete that report because we don't know all the information about a particular board member, or that for some reason we just avoided it or misunderstood it. The Conflict of Interest Commission is set up, as you know, statutorily, and they have a responsibility in certain areas that supersedes other agencies. I'm not concerned. I'm just raising the question, should we be careful about what we are imposing upon ourselves in terms of keeping files and records and compiling various reports on something that we do not have the statutory authority to do? It just sounds like a good thing to do, but I'm only concerned that we may be stepping into something that is much bigger than what it appears to be on the surface right now.
Yeah, so we would not be stepping into any role of complying with the Code of Ethics. That would be the Ethics Commission. And the individual board members are responsible for their own compliance. So it's not the University of Rhode Island that's held responsible if one of us fails to comply with the Code of Ethics. State employees, board members are all subject to the State Code of Ethics. I think in preparing a report and compiling the data, I don't think that holds us to any higher level of awareness because the disclosures are already publicly available. And so to the extent we would be held responsible for knowing those things, I would feel more comfortable knowing that we have this report so that we have something we can refer to and make sure that we're managing potential conflicts where we see them. So we do have a sort of a governance responsibility. It's not a state law responsibility, as any board of a nonprofit would have, to identify and manage potential conflicts of interest in the people that are leading our organization. And so it would not be a statutory obligation, but a fiduciary obligation. I see Margot has her hand up, so I'll pause.
Yeah, so Bob, I appreciate the question because I think you're trying to keep us out of trouble. Sometimes when you gather information, then you're responsible for that information. So I hear that point. I think what we're trying to get at here is more administrative than anything, which is that we're trying to aggregate all the publicly known information so that this committee can look at it. We're as Alyssa just said, in many ways, we're already responsible for understanding what the conflicts are, but it's a difficult administrative process to go like find everybody's information. So I think this is just trying to aggregate it so that it's a report that we can review and say, yep, we see, you know, where the potential conflicts might lie. We've reviewed it as a governance committee. Otherwise, we have to go get it from a lot of different places. So I think this is trying to almost alleviate us of the responsibility that we already have by making it administratively easier.
Yeah, and I believe that Michelle and Alyssa even asked the Ethics Commission if we could receive that data aggregate, and I think the answer was no, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I spoke with someone there and she shared that she could not.
Part of it is it's available online. You can go get it, I think was the answer. So to Margot's point, this will be an opportunity for us to be able to consolidate, and specifically that number 9, I think, is the one that to Alyssa and Michelle's advisement will be the best one for us to get started. And I think as a governance committee, we can then say, you know what, this is a great start, but maybe we need something else from that report. But I think starting at 9 seems to be the one that will answer the call. All right. All right, so we will take that as an action item. We will do the consolidation and bring the responses from number 9 back so that we can make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row. Great. Any other questions on conflict disclosure before we move on?
Courtney, it's Jay. The only thought that I had, I guess, is let's just make sure that we very clearly annotate where we got the information from so that there's no sort of, that the language is not lost in translation, that we're not sort of assuming that we're reading one thing versus the other. We just take everything verbatim and say where we got it from.
Yep.
The responsibility doesn't fall on us.
Yep, makes a whole lot of sense. Great. All right. All right, item number C, and so I'll ask folks to go back into our June time together at the retreat, and I know that it feels like that was a lifetime, maybe even a whole summer ago, but one of the things that out of that retreat that we had talked about as a group and that we would bring back here to governance is to establish 2 or 3 board goals for the next year, things that we want to work on, things that we would like to know more about, how we would want to be engaged, et cetera, et cetera. Just as a reminder of a couple of themes that came out of the self-assessment, to maybe jog the memory or compare notes, that there was a deep appreciation for our roles as trustees, and felt as a group that we were a highly engaged group. There was some asks to use us more often, and gave examples at events, advocacy in Smith Hill. There was a deep appreciation for focus URI and the strategic plan and the road ahead, and a desire to continue to support Mark and his work in any way that we can. Looking at some logistics or governance type things. One is there's a desire to consolidate materials at board meetings so that we are allowing for more dialogue at the meeting and less report out at the meetings. There was also a desire to let committees to do heavy lifting, so that at the board meetings, again, we can have a continued focus on strategic conversations. There is a desire on more interaction and networking time with trustees and faculty and students, both in board meetings, outside of board meetings, and continued interest to continue the route around how do we ensure proactive communication to trustees around key issues and topics in advance of any releasing of information. So hopefully that's helpful as we're rejiggering that information and thinking through on what goals might exist, and what we as a board want to focus our attention around as we think about our governance of URI. Any thoughts on goals?
Courtney, this is Joe Matthews. I'm actually quite interested in knowing what Mark feels is the number one thing that the trustees can help him with.
Yeah.
And that should be one of the two goals that we talk about going forward.
It's great. Mark, not to put you on your spot, but any thoughts that you have off the top of your head, and you surely can think about it too.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you for that. And I will put it back to you because since that the retreat, you listed many things, Courtney, and I was actually interested as you went through that whole long list, if there were the three things that the board thought was the most important out of the 15. There's obviously the most important is really the interactions that we have in the leadership and the guidance that happens. And I'm really grateful to the Board of Trustees for all that they do. But I'd like to get your thoughts. I will also say that we're happy on, to move. For example, one of the things you picked up was participation at events. I would like, maybe there could be a little bit of thought given to how we do that, because we have many events. We invite colleagues, but it's not always possible to come. So how you would like to handle something like that. But I think it's important because you actually get to see more the inner workings of the university, to be honest. So I was grateful. We had the Presidential Stewardship Council retreat last week, and it was great that the chair of the Board of Trustees was able to spend the day with us on that. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that, how be available.
Okay. Any thoughts?
Hi, Courtney, Monica Garnes here. I would just tag along to something that Mark was just talking about. And, I have a great desire to participate. I think as far out as we can, giving notification to the board about key events that, we would like to be present. For me, coming from Arizona, it can be somewhat of a challenge to get there, but if it's something, I will do my best to make that happen. But I'd like to go back to one of the topics that came up. It's just about the students. And, obviously that's part of the, strategic plan as well, and how we could bring that to life as a board.
Mhm.
Whether or not it's students presenting at the board meeting, it could be a student that's heavily engaged in research, which ties right to us moving the college ahead in terms of where we are, R1 research institution. But I would love to see in some past work I've done with the university, it really is an uplifting, and it really kind of ties to our work of wanting to have the best environment for our students.
Mhm.
If we could actually hear from them, the successes they're having, maybe what they need or what they believe other students need to be successful at the university.
Agreed, and that came up a lot, Monica, is that desire. So I would consider that a top goal for sure. Any other thoughts? I've heard more interaction with student and faculty and key events where board members are present. So what can we do to proactively communicate those, work with Mark and his team to identify those so that whether you're in state or out of state, those opportunities exist.
I think it was
Courtney,
clear in-
go ahead, Jay.
oh, sorry about that. I was gonna say, I think it was clear in the survey that we're also looking to do more together as a board.
Yep.
More opportunities to get to know one another on a more personal basis, right? I think you work together, chemistry, that kind of thing.
Yep. Marco?
So I wrote down a list from the meeting, and the big one that you've already covered is gaining greater accessibility to students and faculty.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we give ourselves some kind of metric on that, like
Yep.
how do we measure that? The board participation one was a big one. So how do we curate events better so that board members, we sort of have an idea of which board members can attend and what they're interested in, but how do we curate that for board members?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we have some kind of KPI around that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one that we talked a lot about was bringing the strategic plan to life by bringing in who's accountable for each goal.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big, more amorphous one, but maybe we pick a couple of the big things from the plan and make sure that it's front and center for the board. One of the things that I asked Mark for, which we'll get at some point, is I would like a board dashboard
Mm-hmm.
that shows the KPIs that are associated with the plan, but maybe it's like at a very high level,
Mm-hmm.
and we just flash it up every board meeting. Like, these are the 5 things we're working at. These are 5 things that are on Mark's priority list. Here's how we're doing, and then maybe we sort of circulate amongst the people that are accountable for those goals.
Mm-hmm.
And that way it helps Mark too to keep it as a priority for, from his perspective.
That's great. Good. All right.
Maybe, if I can, Chelsea or Abby, can you remind me, I know that we're close with the KPI board from John Stringer that could be put up for the university. Chelsea, where?
Yeah, so I think we have a dashboard, and I think it's just a matter of clarifying and cleaning up some of the data that's on there. But a dashboard exists, and at this point, it's an internal site, but certainly something I think we could talk about with John Stringer about, where and how it would be most appropriately shared.
Great. So I think what we could do as an action item is to take a look at that, Chelsea, with you and Mark and the team, and see. I want to make sure we're in alignment. We don't, to Margot's point, maybe a top 5 things that maybe are the biggest focus for that specific year, or the biggest opportunity where the board can be of service and support to, right? And not necessarily all, because I know you all have a very long and lengthy and very substantial set of goals that you're charging towards for Focus URI. So I'd like to make sure we can keep it you know, as informative and action-oriented as possible, right?
Yep.
Great. So we can take that as a to-do. We'll bring that back. So I'm hearing a couple of things. One is, to Margot's point, board participation, bringing the strategic plan to life, and then greater accessibility to students and faculty. Feels like 3 great sets of goals to be setting up KPIs around. How does the committee think about that? Yay, nay?
I think just to be clear, Courtney, we do have those KPIs. We presented them, of course, to the Board of Trustees. There is a list. We will make it reachable. Many of those action items, it's good to remember what they are on a regular basis. Some of them will not change, but only once a year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, understood.
And
yeah, the frequency will be based
just
on
to remind also, for example, there's the very nice news today that the University of Rhode Island, you know, finished in US News and World Report, you know, national ranking 151 out of the 435 universities that were ranked. And when you go through all those different areas that they measure, you know, it fits with our KPIs for the university, including things like publication impact of research. But those are things you only see once a year. They're only, you know, essentially changing once a year.
Yeah, totally understand. And I think that one, to your point, will be around this bringing strategic plan to life. I think the greater accessibility with interaction of students and faculty, as well as the board participation, is very board centric, right? And measured based on, you know, board participation and how we're interacting. So to me, the strategic plan one, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, it is, we want to leverage the measures you're already charging towards, right? And you're already working on. The other 2 measures, I think, will be very focused on the board and its role. So yeah, I think it's a perfect fit.
And maybe if I could just remind, on October 10th, we will be having the State of the University discussion. So that's
great.
For those able, that would be a nice critical meeting. But I get you about having a calendar and having things more upfront. Thanks.
Yep, that's great. All right. All right, so we'll take that as a to-do. Jay and many others, if there's anyone who wants to be involved in kind of the development of especially those 2 KPIs, and then the third one is really just leveraging those top priorities that Mark identifies for the board dashboard particularly, then we'll move forward. So is there anyone that might want to take a leadership role in developing those KPIs? I'm happy to help.
I don't mind helping before I'm old.
All right. Thanks, Jay. Okay, and then we'll bring that back to this group and we'll move forward from there. Item D is a new board member onboarding and orientation. I just want to take a moment in recognition to Michelle and many of the teammates who have worked so hard to make sure that our board members are welcomed with open arms and lots of insights and information. And so I want to turn it over to Michelle, who will provide an update on that front.
Thank you. This is another first, as you can imagine, second cohort of board members, and specifically this time we had 8 new board members. So it was a great opportunity to get to know the board members shortly after they were nominated, reaching out to them, letting them know, for example, about the process as it relates to the Senate advice and consent, working with others from within the university. There was outreach from Lil O'Rourke and others from within, and really leading up to the point where they went through the process. We sent the congratulations letter out. There was a welcome letter signed by both Mark and Margot as president board chair. And it was great to have the opportunity to get to know them a little bit more in terms of, after the process of the onboarding, the next step was the orientation. So we have an orientation manual that we've created that we've shared with you. And we've really been able to build upon that orientation. We've learned a lot from the first group of board members. So we started from the ground level, and then getting the feedback from new board members about the orientation. And even though physically you haven't seen the university, some of you haven't had the chance to really explore it yet, hence the tour on Thursday of this week. It was a great way to, if you weren't in alum, or even if you were, things have changed so much over the years, to just really dive a little deeper from a board lens, from a board perspective. So I had the chance to speak with 7 out of the 8 new board members, and we have actually Joe Matthews here, Bob Wagan, and Monica who are new. So if they'd like to share anything more than what I've learned, other than the fact that I was told it went smooth, they didn't have any changes, I'd love to turn it to them so that you hear it from them, instead of me just telling you how they felt. So I'll start with Joe if you'd like to take a moment.
I found the orientation and the welcoming. I received letters of welcome from the 2 chairs of the committee that I sit on, and from Margot and from Mark. When I went to my first board meeting, there was genuine collegiality and friendship. Hey, I got a mentor, Matt, you know? I think that, by the way, is a key component. Somebody that you can lean into while something's going on and say, does he always talk like that? I mean, there's a lot of good things, really a lot of great best practices, and really made me feel welcome right from the get-go. So do it again, rinse and repeat.
And if anyone else wanted to take a quick moment to share how they felt, otherwise, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot.
I'll go. It's Monica. I would agree with everything that's been said already. And then I have to just really publicly recognize Michelle. I mean, what she does to support, I'm sure existing, but I'll just speak for new board members, has just been absolutely incredible. Every question, all times of the day and night, you know, we're 3 hours apart, and she always finds a way to be able to support anything that I need. I'd also like to you know, thank the president. I was able to spend some time with him. So it's just been extremely welcoming, and the support has been tremendous. And it really is, you know, when the first board member, it was like you were home again. So it's very nice to be a part of the Board of Trustees.
Awesome. Thank you, Monica, for sharing that.
Let me also add, I'm on the campus 3 times a week, so I know it pretty well. But the information that I got from Michelle was extremely helpful regarding the board and its background. I thought it was particularly well done in terms of the orientation. So kudos to everybody who put it together, particularly Michelle. And I think it worked out very well.
Good. Well, thank you for the feedback. You know, I think we'll continue to tweak as we hear. And so if there's anything that comes up, you know, please let's let Michelle know. But I really appreciate the work that's been put into setting us up as trustees up for success.
And if I could add, Courtney, that Michelle is a support not only to new board members, but also the older ones who have been around for a while. Michelle is who I call probably more than she'd like me to.
No, I always love hearing from you, all of you. Great.
All right. Good. Thank you so much. And then the last thing I have on my list before we head into policy is board portal feedback. And so one of the things that we want to do on a routine basis as well is to assess our board portal. And if the information that we're seeking on the portal works, if there's anything technically we need to be thinking about around the board portal, but to open up to understand any insights or any wishes that folks have. But Michelle, anything else you want to add on that front?
Yeah, so just to follow up on the conversation we just had earlier with regard to events, I use the Board Effect homepage as my bulletin board. You may have seen it for some of the September committee meetings when I learned, for example, that with move-in, we had so many volunteers. So I had a picture of Melissa Sutherland, who shared with me she was part of Move-In Weekend. I put that up on the homepage for a bit. And then for the October events, if you go onto the homepage of the portal again, you'll see Mark had just shared earlier, the State of the University, Day of Giving, Distinguished Achievement Awards. We have a link for a lot of upcoming events. So I try to use that as a way in which when you're logging in, you do get emails from me, but what a great way to be able to consolidate the emails that you get from me into one email that's on a homepage that you have to log into anyway, when you're getting into the, the committee meetings themselves and then the board meeting on Friday. So I'm using that as another resource and trying to think of other ways in which to get ahead of it. As Monica said, things that we want to make sure that you know about months in advance, if at all possible. So it is something that has been on my list of how to even do it better. But in the meantime, I have been utilizing that Board Effect portal. And ideally, I'm hoping that we can get everybody on board with that more so than we have. It's a portal that came about because we would send a lot of the committee agendas, for example, to board members and other materials. And then we have additional changes along the way. So the portal was another way in which you could access the information. Serves as a great way to store a lot of data. So it's just to help streamline things a little bit better.
Any feedback on the board portal as we're thinking through? And what does participation look like, Michelle? How many folks are using it actively?
I think we have a good solid 70% of the board members using it actively. And part of what I wanted to do with a lot of the new board members is introduce them to it, trying to break them in from the very beginning, if at all possible. Some of them are trying to, as it relates to having their emails set up, having the single sign-on. There's a lot of steps these board members go through. And the Board Effect portal itself, I know Monica, for example, shared with me that she uses it already. So she's a pro. She probably could teach us, which leads me to maybe a training at some point. We did start this portal a few years ago. There's probably a lot of features and maybe perhaps a good opportunity if people were interested that I could schedule a training session of some sort if interested. I gave you a go-to getting started that we created internally just because we were learning a lot through trial and error. But that's something to think about at some point, I think.
Great. And I love the library section. So if I'm ever looking for a document, that's usually the place I go to first. And so that's my go-to. In fact, my own board portal at United Way, we've been looking for ways to make it look more like that library. So that is the model we're working off of. Any additional thoughts on the board portal? Any feedback? Okay, great. The next item is item number F, or item letter F, Board of Trustees policy review. And the first is a discussion around proposed amendments to the university's policy on the awarding of honorary degrees. And so I will refer to Kara for this agenda item.
Thank you, Courtney. Good afternoon, everyone. Just for the new members, I'm Kara Larson. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Enterprise Risk Management. And together with Dan Moose, who is the assistant to VP Abby Benson, we oversee the administrative policy development and review process. So I have 3 items to present to the committee today. The first, as Courtney said, is regarding the review of the policy on the awarding of honorary degrees. You have in your enclosure to F sub 1 the president's memo, the draft policy, as well as the language from the university manual that addresses the honorary degree committee, which, just to note, the policy does not, it only addresses the role of the board in the honorary policy awarding of degrees, honorary degree policy, and does not delve into the workings of the honorary degree committee, which is described in the university manual. So this policy was originally approved by the board on November 5th, 2021, and so it is up for its scheduled review. What the policy basically addresses is the criteria for awarding honorary degrees, the eligibility for such a degree, rules around how nominations are made, who makes them, and how the degrees are approved, the awarding of the degrees approved. And finally, it also includes provisions for the revocation of an honorary degree should that ever need to happen. What the changes in the draft presented here today are from the prior policy are changes in the criteria section. You'll notice that there is new language that adds that there's an intent for any recipients of honorary degrees to have exceptional achievements, serve as inspiring examples, and bring honor to the university. Under the eligibility section, we've added that recipients are no longer required to appear at the main commencement ceremony, but at an appropriate or agreed upon commencement ceremony. And also under the eligibility section, the new draft identifies that faculty, staff, and students, as well as political office seekers and holders, will be ineligible for such a degree for 3 years after the conclusion of their term or service. So this draft has been approved, has been reviewed by the Administrative Policy Committee, and it was approved to send to the board. And so as the first step in board approval, we've brought it to this group for review and any feedback. So are there any questions on the policy?
Kara, can I also just mention that the Academic Affairs and Research Committee also had this on their agenda for review and discussion just a few days ago?
Yes, last Thursday it was presented to them because of their role in recommending approval.
I think these changes are pretty straightforward. Looking to see if there's any discussion or questions on the policy. Again, this is a review, not an approval of the policy. Okay. Hearing none, Kara, thanks so much. And the next item is also yours and is a verbal update on the pending changes to Title IX regulations and anticipated revisions to the university policy on sexual misconduct.
That's correct. One of my functions here at the university is as the Title IX coordinator. And so I have been addressing the proposed regulations from the current administration regarding Title IX. Our existing policy on sexual misconduct is based on the regulations adopted in 2020 by the prior presidential administration, the prior Department of Education. And when President Biden was elected, he and his Department of Education proposed changes to those regulations. So the changes in those regulations are pretty extensive with respect to the definition of covered misconduct, as well as the jurisdiction of the Title IX function of the university. So what we are working on as we wait for the final regulations to be published, and by the way, the Department of Education had indicated that they would publish them in October, but given the current state of affairs, it does not seem that they're going to make their own deadline, but we do want to be able to keep moving the policy update forward so that when the new regulations do become finalized, given the very short implementation period they provide, as little as 60 days, we want to be ready to have it go through the full approval process on a fairly abbreviated time frame. But anyway, so the new regulations have expanded the definition of sex discrimination and sexual harassment to include things like sex stereotypes, sex characteristics, sexual orientation, gender identity, and pregnancy or related conditions. Those things are not in the current Title IX definition of sexual harassment, which is based on harassment or discrimination of a sexual nature. In other words, sexual assault, dating violence, cyber stalking. So this is a pretty broad expansion of the kind of conduct that would need to be addressed through Title IX. This kind of conduct is already prohibited, misconduct around these kinds of definitions of discrimination based on sex are already included in our non-discrimination policy, but that primarily deals with employment. And as we all know, Title IX addresses students and employees. So when the new regulations were proposed, we saw that there would be quite a bit of overlap between the coverage of Title IX and the coverage of Title VII, which is the non-discrimination employment law. So we made the decision to combine the two policies, the sexual misconduct and our non-discrimination policy, simply because the level of confusion that could be generated by having two policies that talk about the same types of discrimination on the basis of sex. So we are working on a joint policy with our existing non-discrimination policy and our sexual misconduct policy. The new regulations also, I'm sorry, was there a question? Okay, sorry, thought I heard something. The new regulations also expand the jurisdiction of Title IX. Currently, the regulations had restricted the jurisdiction of Title IX to essentially on-campus conduct, because it restricted it to any location, physical or geographic location over which the university exercised explicit control or has explicit control over the alleged perpetrator. So, so given the makeup of our campuses, it essentially made the jurisdiction limited geographically to on-campus activity. Also, prior to the 2020 regulations, complaints could be made at any point in time by anyone, even after they had left the university. The current regulations require someone to be actively attempting to participate in a URI education program or activity in order to file a complaint. So there was almost a statute of limitations kind of approach under the current regulations. The new proposed regulations remove that and go back to the system where a complainant can bring a complaint even after they have withdrawn or left the university for any reason. And the reason for that is that it seems that if you have to be still participating, still a student or still an employee, could have been a chilling effect on reporting, because a lot of people don't want to be confronted with the alleged perpetrator. They don't want to have to deal with the process of the grievance and of the grievance process, while still, subject to any potential intimidation or even violence by an alleged perpetrator. So it's thought that by letting people who may withdraw because of the trauma associated with some incident be able to pursue a complaint even after they've left the university. They've also brought back mandatory reporting by all employees. Currently, the current regulations do not require every employee to be a mandated reporter. All employees become mandated reporters in some fashion, either by directly reporting the incident to the Title IX coordinator, or by providing the person who is the alleged subject of the discrimination or harassment with the information to contact the Title IX coordinator and provide them with information on their rights and the process. And it also makes revisions to the grievance procedures. The current grievance procedures require live hearings in every case where both parties, the complainant and respondent, are represented by an advisor who conducts cross-examination on their behalf. And there is a hearing officer who rules on the relevance of every question as it's asked. So it's a pretty formalized, almost trial-like experience currently. And so they've loosened that up to, again, be more like it was pre-2020, where there was a lot of discretion among the schools on how to address individual complaints and sort of almost tailor the response to the individual's needs and the needs of that individual case. So this was just brought here today to tee it up basically, because when the new regulations do finally drop, we are going to be having to finalize that draft policy in fairly short order and get it through all of the reviews in order to have it effective by the time that the regulations will have been required to be implemented.
Any questions for Kara?
Kara, does this have to also go to the risk and compliance committee?
I've been updating the Institutional Risk and Compliance Committee since January. I started describing the new proposed regulations to them, and that committee is aware that we're working on the policy to comply with those new regulations, and they've been given much more detailed, extensive presentations on the actual contents of the new regulations and how it impacts the university operations in processing complaints.
Any other questions amongst the committee for Kara? For new committee members, just to note, normally what the practice is that we'll have the policy come in for review, and then the next meeting we will approve it, and then it will then go to the board. There are a number of extenuating circumstances that come up, this being one of them, where we will see the policy and we'll be asked to approve the policy immediately because of these short timelines. And so we leave it to Kara and Michelle and Abby to help guide us as to when those moments happen. And it sounds like this will be one of them for the October meeting, if you receive everything you need before that point, but it sounds likely.
Yeah, it sounds unlikely that October will be the publication date, primarily because the Department of Education is, excuse me, dealing with hundreds of thousands of comments on the proposed regulations. Yeah. And they haven't sent it to the Office of Regulatory Information Agency. So that regulatory arm of OMB has yet to see them, and they can take up 60-90 days to look at it. So it seems physically impossible at this point for them to make their original anticipated deadline. And also now we're hearing about a looming federal shutdown, potential shutdown that would essentially furlough anyone in the Department of Education working on the regulations. So now people are expressing their concern that will create further delays should a shutdown happen. So yeah, I think we're getting very pessimistic that the regulations are going to be issued in October.
Yeah, and knowing you'll have a 60-day turnaround time, it may necessitate another governance meeting just to handle that policy and approval for you. So we'll figure out how to make that happen and accommodate, knowing that there'll be a break in between this meeting and our February meeting. So we will figure it out as it happens.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions on this policy? All right, and the next is about our calendar, our policy calendar. And one of the things that as a governance committee, we were hoping to see, and I know you guys appreciate you putting together, is really just at least a roadmap, again, as much as we can, right? A roadmap as to when policies come up for review, what the timing of that and what it looks like. So Kara, anything you want to share on that item?
Yeah, do you want me to put it up on the screen?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, can everyone see it?
If you could magnify it, that would be awesome.
All right, let's try that. Whoops, is that too much?
Nope, that's much better. Thank you.
Perfect. So this is just our proposed scheduled review for the policies that are up for a scheduled review. You can see the policy name and the the policy number we've given it, as well as the review date. Obviously, today we were looking at honorary degrees, and then coming up are this list of policies. And we've, on the right, we expect governance committee review in the months and years shown by the checkbox. We have asterisks with the non-discrimination sexual misconduct reviews because those policies are actually open for review, as you know, and we are combining them to comply with the expected new Title IX regulations. So this is for planning purposes for the benefit of the committee, and it's only an estimate. So if anything gets open for review prior to the scheduled review date because of some potential change in regulations or some other reason, then obviously we'll be bringing that forward sooner, and we'll keep you updated about that, any acceleration on any of these dates. And just the last thing to say about this is that our Administrative Policy Committee is actually got an issue under consideration. It's been suggested that we extend the review period for policies, which could also alter the schedule. There's a recommendation that it be go up from 2 to 5 years. So that could also change this schedule, but we would, if that should occur, we would present an updated version. So if there's any questions.
I'm curious, Kara, the reasoning to move it from 2 to 5 years?
Just because of the workload, as you know, Dan takes the laboring oar on this whole process, and given the number of policies that we have been able to put into place through the new procedure that that we started in 2020, 2019, 2020, that there's just so many policies now, and so many are now coming up for review at the same time as we're also trying to put new policies through, that it's just becoming quite cumbersome and burdensome to keep up. And, you know, sometimes we'll open them, you know, most times we open them for review and there doesn't seem to be any real need to make any changes. So it does not seem that it's, you know, really critical that we have such a short period of time between reviews.
I'll also add, if I may, that we think this will allow us to spend time on policies that require more extensive and lengthy discussion, and we're seeing more and more of those coming. So it will allow us to really effectively prioritize our efforts. And at any time, if there's a regulatory change, or if there's a particular member of our policy committee that wants to revisit a policy that's not up, they can certainly raise that, and the committee can review the policy. So it's not set in stone, but it'll allow us to move forward in a more efficient manner and focus on the more complex policies that need discussion. So thanks.
Thanks for that clarity. Any questions on the review or the schedule that we have here? I think having gone through this now, kind of one full round, I think the timeline for me makes a lot of sense, but wanted to make sure everybody else, if they had any questions, we could answer them. All right. Kara, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
The last item on our agenda is item 3, and that is adjournment. Thank you everybody for your time, and look forward to seeing you later in the week. But may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bob. I'll ask for a voice vote. All in favor, please say yes.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. The next URI Board of Trustees Governance Committee meeting is scheduled for October 26th, 2023. Thank you, everybody, and see you at the end of the week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.